Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Goalline webinars. Today's webinar is about main contact administration. We're going to be covering things like adding administrators with granular permissions, customizing your display of data, both in reports and on your website. We'll do an overview of the available reports, as well as talk about communicating with both members and other administrators through the email communication tools. A little bit of housekeeping as usual to get started. You don't have any audio options in the webinar, but there is a chat. I do monitor that chat, so if you have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to throw them there. You can also reach out to our support team via various methods, either right away or after today's webinar. If you have questions later on, we can contact support by emailing into goallinesupport@stacksports.com. We also have faq.goalline.ca, and there is the support button on the goalline.ca corporate website that will allow you to access the live chat and other contact information to reach out by phone. We're going to hop in right away. I don't believe today's webinar is going to take the full hour. I may have said that in the past before. I'm going to try to stick with it today because this topic is pretty fun, but it's also pretty straightforward. So we're going to hop in to the back end. Right now, what you're looking at is one of our demo sites. This is Trevor's demo site, and he uses this and switches it up a lot. Goalline Silver websites, which is what the layout here is, highly configurable, easy to change it up and change the look on a day-to-day basis. The other demo site that I use frequently is my Northeast Athletic Officials Association website. This is in a gold layout. The gold layout is a little bit more static and provides custom graphics. So regardless of which type of layout that you have, all the functionality in the admin side on the back end or in the control panel, various words that we use to describe that, they're all going to be the same. All the tools are the same. The only difference between these two layouts with respect to the admin control panel is that the silver layout has an additional tool to manage the configuration of that initial home page. All of the reporting, email options, and other customizing of display information, that's all going to be exactly the same regardless of what site layout you have, even if you have one of Goalline's older layouts that we may refer to as a standard layout. Or if you are registration only and don't actually have a public-facing front-end website, you still have access to all of the same reports and admin controls that we're going to be taking a look at today. So we're going to log into the back end of your Goalline control panel. I'll just point out, I guess, the admin login is always going to be located in the upper right-hand corner, regardless of your website layout. That's where you're going to find that admin login. Your email address and, your username and your password is going to be asked for there. There's also a password reset or a forgot password option if you ever need to use that. Your main administrator can also manually reset or manually send you a password reset request. So once you're logged into the Goalline control panel, you're going to come to your master menu, and we are going to talk about what different types of permissions administrators could have. The main contact administrator, which would be, generally speaking, that's going to be the person who engaged in the agreement with Goalline to get the site set up initially. That one person is definitely going to be considered a main contact, and they're created automatically with full permissions. So there are no granular permissions or restricted permissions for anyone who's considered a main contact. The one and only exception to a main contact's permissions being absolutely the entire system is when it comes specifically to officials and referee assigning. Assigning permissions are always granular. Even if you're the main contact, you may still want to have restricted admin permissions when it comes to assigning officials to games across different divisions. So that's about the only exception there when it comes to having main contact access. So that's still something that you would set up granularly, and we'll take a look at that as we enter into the admin permissions. Adding administrators is done from the master menu, and it's going to be done in the people settings section. You're going to find an item called manage website admins. And this area here is going to list for you all of the admins that are currently listed, and it provides you just some general information about their profile. The most important part here sometimes is the title that they hold, especially when you have an organization with some turnover or changing roles from year to year or season to season. So the title If someone is a team administrator that was added because they're a team contact, a team manager, for example, they would be listed as a team administrator. That may still be a main contact, but generally speaking, they are restricted to just team permissions. The title also helps you to understand what permissions a person should have. So if we have somebody who is a communications manager, it's logical to assume that you want to give them permission to communicate through things like email announcement tools, maybe creating news articles, and maybe even creating web pages. So as you're looking at what role the individual needs to fill within your organization, that's going to guide you through the kinds of permissions that you'll want to provide. I'm going to provide a few examples and sort of recommended permissions as we go through some of these, but just keep in mind that every organization is just slightly different, and we all know that when you're involved, whether it's that you're a paid member of the association or if you're a volunteer, oftentimes we wear lots of different hats. So you may have one administrator who is both your website manager and your registrar or treasurer, or maybe your equipment manager is also your officials assigner. So there's going to be lots of times where there's not necessarily one role, and the Goalline system is equipped for that. I'm going to click the Add Admin button. When we go to add an administrator, this is also something that may differ depending on the structure of your organization. If you are someone who runs leagues, like house leagues, and also have rep teams or association teams that play in someone else's league, you may have the option here where it says to create a league administrator or create a team administrator. And it's very important to select the appropriate option here. A league administrator is able to do team management types of activities, but they do that through the league control panel. It's very common to have a league coordinator who has league level administrative permissions that allow them to do things like view and edit the rosters of the teams that are part of their league. I'll reiterate again for those that may not be quite as familiar with Goalline that when we refer to leagues, once you're inside your own Goalline site, you may also refer to those as divisions, categories, divisions. So U13 Girls A, that is a division. Goalline refers to that as a league. So the league coordinator for the U13 Girls A league would be added as a league administrator with permission to manage that and the teams within it, within the granular permissions that you're going to grant. A team administrator may only have access to the team level. They cannot affect anything that happens at the league level, even if their team is part of a league. Typically speaking, a team administrator is going to be granted permissions to view their roster. Potentially, they may be given permission to view and edit their roster, which allows them to release players. They're not always granted the ability to add players, which is actually to create a new player in the system or to pull in a player who's already part of the database, but has not actually been assigned to the team by a level of administrator that does have that permission. They also typically get granted permissions for reporting game scores, which allows them to do actually two things. One, it allows them to obviously report their game scores, but it also provides them the permission they may need to print game sheets. Goalline does provide printable game sheets for any scheduled games amongst the teams within your system, so you can have game sheets printed, and the team administrator is often going to be the one responsible for doing that, and that may be a team manager. And you can obviously have more than one team administrator for each team. Generally, a coach and a manager might be the ones that you want to grant access. Assistant coaches and trainers may be part of the team, but they may not necessarily require any actual access to the system. I'm going to click on Create a League Administrator, and we'll just take a look at the overall information. Whether you're creating a league or a team user, this first section up here is exactly the same. We want first name and last name. We definitely need an email address. It's strongly recommended and encouraged to provide a phone number, but it's not required. It's also strongly recommended to include an appropriate title. The username, you can either enter this yourself or check the box that says to generate the username automatically. This is going to take their first initial and their last name and combine it to create a username. If their username doesn't end up having 6 or more characters, the system is going to add zeros to the end of their username in order to make it a minimum of 6 characters. If you are using the assigning platform to assign officials, umpires, referees, and that type of thing, you can also indicate if this person is an official in chief. The word official on my particular site here is using official because I have a multi-sport site, but this word could be umpire if you are softball or baseball. It may be judge if you are, a track and field association, or it may be referee if you're one of the sports that uses the term referee. If you don't have the official system enabled at all, this may not be an option for you. If you're interested in learning more about the official system, you can reach out either to Trevor Scott on our sales team, or through support, and get pointed in the right direction for us to provide some good information there. As you can see, the next little box is a Goalline admin only option. If someone is the main contact for your organization, this is the box that we check to indicate that. This is the box that basically removes all of the granular permissions that are going to be shown below. If you do have a change in your main contact, one of the reasons that we require you to contact the Goalline support team to let us know that you've changed your main contact is so that we can go in and update that new main contact with the checkbox to indicate that they are in fact that main contact, so that they're not going to be restricted in any of their permissions. There is an option to create user roles. User roles are really they're designed for the association-wide user. So a user role for a website administrator or a webmaster or communication manager might be an appropriate role to create. When you're creating an administrator, instead of selecting the specific permissions that you want to give them, you would select their role from the drop-down list. You create this in the previous screen, and we'll go back and we'll take a look at that before we exit out of the admin permission section here of the webinar for today. Having a role will pre-select the permissions that this person has, and it will restrict them to only those permissions. So there's kind of pros and cons to that, depending on how large and structured your organization is. If you have a small organization where, as I said earlier, lots of people wearing lots of different hats, the user role setup may not really fit for you, because you may need to combine a person with multiple roles. If you do have very distinct specific roles where a username is going to be associated with one and only one role, then the role option may be something that that helps you out. And when a new person comes into that same position, say in the next year or after your next AGM, you can remove the previous administrator, add the new one with the information above, and simply select their role. And when you create them, it's going to provide them with all of the permissions that are associated with the role you've created. When roles are not appropriate, that's when we get into the sections below, which are association-wide, and in this case, league-specific permissions. This is because we selected the option that said to create a league administrator. Had we selected a team administrator, we would be seeing team-specific, and we will hop in there just to take a quick look at the differences. I'm going to point out the association-wide permissions here first, because these could apply to either a league or a team-specific administrator. Association-wide permissions are those items that are available at the master menu. So far, we've only been at the master menu today, and we've only clicked on the one tile for managing website administrators. If I only have access to one or two tools from the master menu, only those tools are going to be available for me to click on. Anything else I might need to do in my specific divisions or in my specific team menus, I'm going to use the option up here to select the team or league control panels that I have permission for. If I only have permission for one or two of these divisions, I'm only going to see those in my drop-down list. A main contact will see both the league and the team control panel drop downs. A league administrator will only see the league, and a team administrator will only see the team drop downs up here. So only a main contact will actually see both of these options. The association-wide permissions are grouped similarly to what we'll see with the league and team-specific permissions. So first we see communication tools. That's the orange set here. I'm going to make my screen a little larger so that we can read what's in there. These are text, so it is searchable. So if you ever finding yourself saying, where's the news option, you can use Control F and type news. I use Control F a lot, even though I do know the system quite well, just because there are a lot of options, of course. this and this section here, one of the benefits of it being so granular is also kind of a detriment in the sense that sometimes it's a little hard to find what you're looking for. If I'm creating that communication or webmaster role, I definitely want to pay very close attention to what permissions I'm going to grant them from the association-wide communication tools section. I probably want them to be able to create news articles, and I want them to be able to send email announcements. I may want them to be able to manage web pages as well, so creating, editing, and deleting web pages. I may want them to be responsible for managing our photo galleries, and I may also want them to be in charge of our ticker announcement, which is the announcement that will scroll across the screen. I don't have one over there. I have one. Here we go. So we have one here. Return to play guidelines are up there as a scrolling ticker announcement. So that's just an example there of what those are. So these are some settings that a communications or a webmaster would really need to have access to these things. If you don't want them to have access to some of these, you don't have to grant all of these checkboxes. If you want them to just do all of it, you can even check the all button for the entire section of tools. There are some permissions that I always like to point out that are particularly important to just control when necessary. The first ones in communications are going to be the standard menu settings and site configuration. These two tools have the ability to impact the way your system is going to operate and the way some of your menus are going to behave. And so it is important to restrict that permission to only those who really should be touching it. It's also something that just in general doesn't really need to be updated too often. Standard menu settings is what's going to determine what is placed in your menu in the top row or the second row. Site configuration also has an impact on what happens if I do place certain items in my menu. Am I going to see leagues listed here, or am I going to see teams listed here? If I decide to select one of my divisions, am I going to land on the news page or the standings page? So site configuration and standard menu settings, definitely important tools to be able to access, but they're not tools that should be updated and changed on a regular basis, because once your members have gotten used to where they find things in your site and through the menu, you don't want to kind of change up their navigation too frequently. Another one that I point out that sometimes does get separated out from your typical webmaster and communication manager kind of jobs is the ad permission. So creating and deleting ads is something that is a separate permission. Oftentimes organizations are going to have a partnership or sponsorship coordinator. The partnership and sponsorship coordinator probably needs access to some of these communication tools, but I would recommend that generally creating and deleting ads and potentially creating a news article may be the kinds of permissions that you want there. The news article option for a sponsor coordinator would be important for them to be able to promote and notify the association and membership about a new partnership and a new sponsorship opportunity that's come up for your association. Meanwhile, creating the ad itself to be placed on your site, and I'll just go back over to my site over here. I've got a bunch of ads that are kind of on here. So my Goalline powered by Stack Sports ad here. If we go to Trevor's demo site, we can see a similar ad there. So being able to create ads that go into the actual dedicated ad space is tied directly to the permission here for creating and deleting ads. So you really want to just be thoughtful about what is the role of this individual and what permissions do they need to have. You can always edit permissions down the road to add or take away specific permissions, and the main contact is always going to have permission to do certain things. It's okay also to request a second main contact so that you have two individuals in your organization that act as a main contact. I often recommend that just because every now and then people actually take vacations and they may not be available to do certain tasks that are kind of higher level permissions. So just keep that in mind, that you can certainly request that somebody be added as an additional main contact website administrator. We just need to know which administrator it is. And that request does need to come from someone who is currently listed as a primary contact with the organization. The next section over is our people tool section, and there is a ton of stuff that happens in the people tool section. There are a few that I'm going to point out specifically, but in general, it's mostly just well, actually, let me back up for one moment. So the Goalline system is organized into a lot of different types of people, which is why there's so many more options in here. So the types of people in the Goalline system, one type of person is website administrators, and that's what we're looking at right now. If I want my administrator to be able to update other administrators, add, remove, change permissions, that type of thing, I do want to give them the permission to add or edit website administrators. That permission, I always recommend, stays very, very close to the chest when it comes to main contacts and potentially, one or two other people who have that ability. But it is not a permission that should be granted to all website administrators that you add to the system. It is possible to enable, delete, disable, change permissions, add permissions, and that type of thing for any administrator if they have the permission to add website admins. The other person types that exist in the Goalline platform are going to range from, and they're fairly logical, right? We have players who may be referred to as athletes in your system, depending on if you're multi-sport. So we have players that can be added or edited. So this is my ability to add players to the system, to edit player profiles, to delete player profiles. But I also have a subsequent view option for this. So you can provide somebody with view only permission to view players. You can also provide somebody permission to import players. That's to take a CSV file of player information and upload it into the system to either add or update the records of existing players. This is separate from the permission for adding and editing players. If I have this permission, but not this permission, I can add players, but I can only do it one at a time through the Create Player tool. Editing player info displayed is also a way to impact the display of information for players and just players. So this is things that will affect search results if you're searching for players. It will also affect the display of roster and profile information on the public side of your website. Each of these types of permissions, you're going to find that we have this available for coaches as well. So coaches is kind of all of your team staff. So the first person type is our player person type. And then there is the coach person type. And a person may be both, and that's totally fine. The Goalline system is going to connect them to their master record by making sure that we understand their first name, last name, date of birth. Okay, John Smith, born on January 1st, 2010, is the same John Smith, born on January 1st, 2010, over there in our coach database. They have one master record ID, but they have a role as a player and a role as a coach. Further to that, we have the ability to have registrants. Registrants are not players and not coaches, but they can also be added manually. They can be registered. They can be searched, edited, deleted. They can also be imported. If I have the ability to add or edit registrants, I have the ability to import registrants. Volunteers may or may not be enabled specifically. Volunteers typically, this is really just a person type for reporting purposes. It's not specifically to use with actual volunteer management, but they are, it is something that you could create a registration form to have volunteers register with you. And then those volunteers can be, added as coaches in different ways through the system. So the person types here, we've got our players now, our coaches, registrants who are not players or coaches, volunteers, again, not players and coaches or registrants. And then the last person type is going to be our officials person type. So officials has their own little section, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So with the person types, you have the ability to edit or just view. So you'll see that view only permission for players and for coaches as well as for officials. So just keeping that in mind, because depending on who you are and who you're adding as an administrator, you may need them to be able to do some, but not all of this for different person types. Creating registration forms is a permission that, regardless of person type for the registration form, this permission is required in order for someone to go in and create registration forms for any type of person in the system. Executives are a little bit different than our regular person types. So executives are available to insert and add to the system as a listing. This can be placed in your menu using your standard menu settings, or it can just be kept on the back end. And it is a great idea to keep an up-to-date executive listing, even if you don't display it on the public side of your website. The reason that may come into play is that if there ever is an issue regarding ownership of the site or with an escalation procedure, it's important for someone to be able to validate who those executives are. And that could include, the Goalline support team providing information to a main contact of information that's been provided on the executive listing. Executive listings and all of these other person types, they're all available as email recipients when we go to look at our email announcement forms. So another reason why it's a really great idea to include all of these participants, regardless of what type of person they are, into the system so that you're going to be able to communicate with them appropriately. There's titles and things available for your executives as well, and you control all of that. So if you are structured as a society versus a chapter versus an association or a club, you may have different terminology for how you refer to your members. You may have a chairman of the board as opposed to a president, and that type of thing. You may have a treasurer but not a registrar, and that type of thing. So just keep that in mind, that there's lots of ways for you to enter those people into the system, and that's going to build on all of the different ways that we're going to be able to communicate with them down the road. There's, let's see here. So our email sign up list, this is something where if you want someone to have the ability to edit that, this may be something you want to combine with that sponsorship or communication manager so that they can view the email sign up list. Being able to view those lists is a great idea so that they can see who's signed up to receive information. That list can also be exported to a CSV formatted file, and it can also be deleted and purged on a regular basis. Which happens a lot. A lot of organizations will choose to purge their email sign up list at the beginning of each season so that you're not emailing me this year about my about a game that I really wasn't interested this year. I was interested last year in that U13A email communication. We already talked about website administrators. That's where we are right now. Email aliases is not a supported feature anymore. If you do happen to have email aliases, you can still continue to use those, but this is not a permission that you would see on any new Goalline site. We have other options within the Goalline platform that enhance some of the experience, things like registration, boundary maps, and roster locking for either team registration events or just in general locking rosters, managing suspensions, and your financial permissions for editing and viewing registration data. These are some advanced features that if you see these available on your site, you're able to grant those permissions. I'll point out specifically with respect to managing locked rosters. Locked rosters is initiated either through a team registration form that locks rosters on a specific date in the future, or it's through the site configuration tool where a checkbox is selected to say we're locking all the rosters now. If I have permission to manage locked rosters, I am able to manage the roster even though the settings indicate that it should be locked. But a typical team administrator who does not have this permission would not be able to manage that roster. Managing suspensions is something that happens at the master menu. If you're a soccer organization, there are a certain amount of automatic suspension tools that are available through site configuration, but they can be further managed through the suspension tool. If you do manage suspensions and you are using automatic suspension tools, it's very important to make sure that someone has permission to edit those suspensions in case the automatic suspension is not sufficient for the nature of the incident. Being able to edit and view registration data goes hand in hand with the person type you're able to view. If I'm able to view players and I'm able to edit registration data, I am able to view and look up a player profile and I'm able to edit its registration data, but I'm not able to edit the profile itself. I'm able to view registration data if I have this permission, but if I only have view and view, I can search for them, I can look at their profile and see their registration information, but I cannot make any changes to it. So lots of different ways for you to combine the granular permissions with respect to people in order to accommodate your structure as an organization. I'm going to skip right to officials just to reiterate a few things that we've talked about here to finish up the conversation about people in general. The official tools is going to have basically a lot of all of this going on. So adding and editing versus just viewing officials. This is fairly obvious. It's just like the add, edit, or view only option for players. Being able to edit assignments and view assignments is the same idea as well. I can either make assignments and actually send them out, or I can just see what assignments have been made by the other assignments signers. Being able to edit pay rates and view summaries and view contact lists, these are all specific permissions that affect whether or not you can do those things. Official system preferences is something that may not be enabled for all organizations, but official system preferences, if this is available for you, should be restricted to, generally speaking, your official in chief, because this is where things like limitations on the number of games in a day or a week that a referee or official can be assigned. So these are things that essentially establish what your policies are based on what your governing body rules are. Being able to view and submit official evaluations is exactly what it sounds like as well. The Goalline platform with the officials module does include officials evaluations. There's a standard evaluation form, and there are some sport specific. So we won't take a look at those today, but just to mention that that's what those permissions are. The last section in the association wide, there are some things here that I also recommend stay restricted. Being able to upload a schedule file, manage schedules in general, and manage seasons in general. These are permissions that I recommend that at the master menu are kept restricted to only those responsible for scheduling. Managing seasons is something that if you've taken part in any Goalline webinar, you'll know that it's a really important function. Managing seasons and schedules is really important for your season preparation, and it really is an administrative task more than a scheduling task. The actual uploading of a schedule file and adding games is typically separate from the setup of creating the season and ensuring your season is ready to receive game schedules and practice schedules. So keep that in mind, that manage seasons and schedules. This is an important task, but it shouldn't be something that all of your administrators have the ability to do, because you don't want to end up with season date range conflicts or duplicate schedule names, for example, and things like that. Being able to create association teams or manage leagues to create leagues. Again, these are permissions that should be restricted to that master menu, and generally the main contact typically takes care of that. Adding a new association team doesn't tend to happen too often unless you just grow, which is awesome for you actually. If you do grow and have to add a new team, that's a fantastic problem to have. But there are definitely going to be administrators who have permission to go ahead and create that new association team. Being able to import teams is typically only really a valuable tool when it comes to leagues, so that if you're not using team registration, but you run a league, being able to import teams allows you to import all the team names that are going to be participating if you're not going through a registration process. Adding venues is another one that I strongly recommend stays extremely restricted, probably even more restricted than managing seasons, because I do think that, in my experience here and in any other sport organization, whether it's using Goalline or not, having duplicate venues can be a major problem. And it's usually a very innocent mistake. And I always talk about the difference between using the full name of a venue versus a nickname or an abbreviation. And you'll find that everyone kind of abbreviates things in a different way. I'm from the Halifax area here in Nova Scotia. And if you told me that there was a hockey game happening at the Four Pad, I'm going to have to ask you follow-up questions, because there are more than one facilities in the region that have four ice pads in it. And so I would need to double check, do you mean the RBC one or the BMO one or the Bedford one, So it's very important when you're adding your venues that the permission is restricted to avoid potential conflicts. Another example I use all the time is I actually live in Cole Harbour specifically, and we have something called the Cole Harbour Place, and the rinks have their own special names, but you'll see a million different ways for people to refer to the Cole Harbour Place, and the rinks are called Scotia 1 and Scotia 2. So, CHP S1 is one way to say that, and it's not confusing. But if there was also a Cole Harbour Place as S1 or a CHP Scotia 1, that creates the potential in the Goalline platform for a conflict, because we're going to see those as two completely separate venues that you can be scheduling things at. So that's why I always really reiterate how important it is to restrict the permission for managing venues, so that you don't end up with those kinds of issues that could potentially create some pretty egregious conflicts in your scheduling. So that's an important one. So that's the association-wide permissions. And as I mentioned earlier, that's going to cover both league and team administrators, because if they need access to their team or league as well as some items from the master menu, you can grant them that permission. Down below, we see the league-specific permissions that are available, and this is going to show you a row for each and every league or division that you've created on your site. It does not have to have an active season and schedule in order for it to appear in this list. It just has to exist in the Manage Leagues section of the admin control panel. You'll notice that we're divided here as well into communication tools, league admin tools, schedule tools, and statistics tools. The communication tools, these are all the same as what we saw above. The difference is if I created a news article here, it's going to show up in the U16 Boys House league menu on the site as opposed to the main menu's news archive. So that's the only difference, is that when we create things here, it is part of the league information and not part of the general entire association. League admin tools, again, is exactly what it sounds like. It's the ability to do most of the same things we were talking about in the association-wide people section, but it's restricted directly to the division you have these permissions for. What I'll point out as well, that along the bottom, I can grant permission for a task across all of the divisions. I can also go over and select all for all permissions for any given league. So just keep that in mind, that you don't really have to go through and click all the individual checkboxes. If this person is the person responsible for adding players for everyone, you can go ahead and just check that permission for all. Another one I see used there is a lot is the reporting of game scores, because if I have the responsibility to do that, I probably need to do it across all of the divisions. Being able to lock game stats is part of our statistics section over here as well. This goes hand in hand with reporting games, but this permission is only available at the league level. So when your team administrators are going in and reporting game scores for their team games, you can come through and review, make updates, and then lock that game so that it can't be updated by those team administrators anymore. The schedule tool section, I'm always a little bit leery about what permissions I would recommend here, because as I've mentioned a few times, it really does depend on the organization structure and whose job it is to do some of these things. There are certain permissions that generally don't need to be granted at the league level, because they should generally be managed at the association level, and that's going to be the manage seasons and schedules options. But being able to view a schedule, this is a view option. It's not an edit option, so it's safe to grant that to just about anyone. Being able to upload a schedule file, again, is going to be really dependent on whether or not that makes sense for the division that you're providing this permission for. And then when it comes to practice times and things, whoever's responsible for managing practices, if it's done at the league level, great, grant these permissions. But if you're a league that doesn't have anything to do with practices at all, then you would just make sure that no one has these permissions, because you don't want them creating practices on your system if they're not managing their practice schedule there, if your system is just managing the game schedule for them. A great example of when you would be using that is for house leagues. So if you're running an IP program, you might have 2 or 3 groups in your IP program. They're run as a house league, so you might have IP1 over here as your division name, and you would be managing practices for the teams within there. So you can certainly grant those permissions when it makes sense. But if you're just hosting a league with lots of clubs around you that are participating in your league, those clubs are managing their own practices, so you don't have to grant that permission. As I mentioned, the statistics tools, obviously reporting game stats and locking game stats, that's a big part of what happens there. As I mentioned earlier, reporting game scores is also where the permission comes from to print game sheets. If you are a baseball or softball organization, you're also going to see some pitch count report options. And this only applies, for me, I have a multi-sport site, so this only applies to the organization or to the leagues on my site that are indicated as being baseball or softball. So those are our league specific permissions. I'm just going to hop back and we'll hop into the team specific, and we'll just point out the differences. Not a whole lot of differences. And again, just as a general overview, everything we talked about so far is going to apply here, except for now we're restricted to just this one team. So when I create a news article, it's for that one team. If I send an email announcement, it's to my team as well as other administrators and possibly executives, because we'll take a look at those the forms that allow you to select your recipients, and you'll get a good idea there. Same thing goes team admin tools instead of league admin tools. We can only add players to our one and only team. But again, I could have access to multiple, so I could be given permission to view and edit team rosters, which gives me the ability to view and release players from rosters and edit positions for whatever teams I've been granted that permission for. Over here, we have report game stats. And again, I can only report game stats. I can't lock game scores at the team level. When it comes to schedule tools, I often see the further we go down and into, so we've got association wide, then we've got league, and then we've got team. Teams are generally not responsible for their own scheduling. So when teams are not responsible for their own scheduling, you can ignore almost all of the schedule tools when it comes to adding a team administrator. There is a section of the Goalline platform that you could take some pretty serious advantage of with respect to trading venue times and giving up practices. And this helps out a scheduling coordinator who's responsible for managing practice times. If I give this permission to my teams, they have permission to take a practice that's already been scheduled for them and put it up for grabs for other teams to claim, and they can claim a practice time that another team has put up for grabs. It requires no administrative interaction from someone who is the one who adds or edits the practice schedule, but it allows the teams to only pick from time slots and venue times that have already been scheduled to someone else. So I can't create a new practice, but I can claim a practice time from another team if you use this feature. That's a feature that I find is not as well used as it could be in the Goalline platform. So keep that one in mind in case you think that might help save some of your scheduling coordinators a little bit of time. So that's our team specific. I'm going to go back again, and we're going to click on the manage user roles option here. This is where if I was to create, say, a webmaster role, I could do that here. So if I want a webmaster, I'll call the role webmaster. I want my webmaster to be able to create news articles, create email announcements, create events for our listing, manage our photo galleries, and do ticker announcements for us. But I don't want them to be able to do anything else. So I will just go ahead and save that role, and that will be the only role that's available. Those will be the only permissions for them. So we've created that user role here now. If I go and decide that I want to create a league administrator here now, I can do that, and I'm going to have an additional role to select from here. And when I create this person, they'll automatically have the permissions that I had checked off. That covers our administrator permissions. There are a lot of permissions available. And as I mentioned numerous times here, there are so many different things within your organization that may change or determine how you want to grant those permissions. So think about what they need to do and make sure that they have the permissions to accomplish it, but also know that you can always update these permissions down the road if you find that it wasn't enough or it was too much. Within those permissions, some of the things that we referred to are going to relate to how can I affect the display of data and what can I do when it comes to reporting. So the first thing that I'm going to click on is edit athlete info displayed. Edit athlete info displayed is something that goes, it's going to be almost the same tool as edit registrant info displayed and edit coach info displayed, as well as edit referee info displayed that we'll see in the referee section. I'm only going to click on edit athlete info displayed, and we're going to discuss this here because this has the most options, and I'll point out which options are going to be seen in other places. The very first column we see here is athlete search. So the athlete search is, for me, it says athlete because it's multi-sport. For you, it might just say player. The player search is where you're going to do most of your reporting on your player information. Whatever items are checked off in the column for player search, when I select to view my custom data, those are the things I'm going to see. So I can choose from extra field questions that I've created on registration forms. I can also choose from every standard piece of information for parents, both parent 1 and 2, as well as all of the standard information available in a player profile. So here we have first name, last name, date of birth. We've got gender here. I don't have, let's do jersey number. Another one I always like to include in here is current team. Current team is just really great information to have in your export if you are exporting the information. It's always part of the profile, but it won't be part of your search results unless you specifically indicate that it should be. So there's all kinds of permission or items here that we can add to our athlete information displayed. But notice how, as I look over to these other columns, I can't add all the same information everywhere. So our next column is athlete import sample. The import sample is exactly what it sounds like. If you give someone permission to import players, they have the ability to download a sample spreadsheet. The sample spreadsheet is designed to just provide the proper column headers so that the information that's uploaded is uploaded in the right order. You can impact the sample to make sure that people understand what you want them to upload if they're uploading participants. They have to include first name, last name, and date of birth. There's no import option without having first name, last name, and date of birth. Many Goalline organizations also require email address. So if you are using certain types of registration tools and shopping cart tools, email address is also required. So that may be something that you need to include in there. All the other information, though, is going to be optional to include in an import. But if it is a field that exists in the system and you import it, you are going to be either ignoring or updating the record of information for that field. So with athlete import sample, we can include all of the same stuff as we can include in our player search results. The team list export has almost all the same thing, except for some different payment information is not available here. The reason these 3 columns provide us with so much data that we can check off to select as part of our reports is because these can only be accessed as an administrator with the permission to have been granted the ability to access these things. These columns here do not have any impact whatsoever on what displays on the public side of the website for someone else to navigate to. As we scroll over, we can see athlete profile, team roster, and league leaders. League leaders only shows up when you do have leagues on your site. So leagues will automatically have a league leader section that you can choose to display as part of your site, and you can choose what information about your athletes is going to display there. You'll notice that this section of information is quite a bit shorter because we do not want you to have the ability to post their address publicly or their phone numbers, their citizenship information, their health card numbers. That information is not part of a public profile for an athlete. But if you do want their first name, last name, you could put their birth date or just their birth year. You can put things like height and weight if you collect that information. Typically, athlete profiles and team rosters will have first name, last name, jersey number, and position. Depending on how elite you are or how high skill level, you may also want things like hometown, their shot, their, some other information that, recruiters and scouts might be interested in having. League leaders, we can only show a few things because this is just a list that's going to lead them to the profile. So generally speaking, we're just going to have first name, last name, and their picture. And then once I click on their name, it's going to take me to whatever information you've allowed to display as part of their athlete profile. So that's how we affect the public display of information. There's a quick question. I'm just going to read that question here. So the question is about, is it better to have a team admin upload players, or is it better to have the league or state administrator upload rosters and display athlete information? So that's a great question. And I think better is the hard word in there. It really depends on where the source of truth is. I'm a huge fan of using registration tools so that the individual themselves is the one providing the information. And when that registration system is sort of connected into the Goalline platform, you don't even have to worry about the integrity of that information. So what I would say is, whoever is the source of truth is probably the best person to be responsible for importing or uploading information into the system. So if you're not using Goalline's registration tools directly in your own site, that may be something where you want to add an administrator with the permission to upload participants, and those participants would be, following whatever registration system that they used. Keep in mind as well that Goalline has networking tools within other Goalline sites. So if you have your clubs using Goalline for their own purposes, they have their own website, their own scheduling tools, their practices, and things like that. They can do their own registration and then tie into your league so that your schedules push to their site and their roster pushes to your site. So there's lots of different ways to go about that. Just a little squeaky voice there, sorry. Lots of different ways to go about that, really depending on how the information gets to you in the first place. And every sport, and in my experience, every sport and every geography is just ever so slightly different, that there's not really one best way to do it. Standardization across a lot of different clubs can be pretty difficult. I think in your case, it sounds like it would be a great idea for you to add a website administrator that has permission. There's something, I'm going to hop into my other demo site here for a moment, and I want to show you, and I apologize for the tangent here, but I think this is important to look at. Goalline also has tools that allow you to manage regions, and regions can be labeled as things like associations, clubs, districts, club, district, region, anyway, a label that distinctly differentiates between regions. When you are using our region tools, you can create a website administrator that has all of the permissions that we've discussed here, but restricted to the region that they are responsible for. So if I have someone who is responsible for the Edmonton region, I can provide them permissions. I can give them a website admin profile that gives them the ability to upload or import coaches and import players, but only for the Edmonton region. So there's definitely some tools that allow you to sort of take that large geography or a geography with tons of clubs and restrict permissions accordingly, so that you can have a club coordinator who's responsible for everything that has to do with their club. So I'm, mixing my message here with the regions that I have listed, because some of them are called clubs and leagues and things like that, and other ones are cities. But the idea being, regions allow you to break up these permissions even further, so that I can have association-wide permissions that are restricted to my specific region. So apologies there. We'll just head back over here to edit athlete info displayed. So this is how we affect what information is going to be seen in what places. So we can take a look over on the public side here. And as I drill into any of my my sports or my divisions, my teams, I'm drilling down into the menus themselves. I can also look at things like statistics. This is where those league leaders are going to come in. Let's see if we've got any stats from previous schedules here. I probably didn't pick a good one to select. I'll go over to my other demo site here. So when we have, if I go to any of my divisions, I'm going to pick hockey because I know I have the most actual data in there. So let's go ahead and pick our women's league here. So if I go to statistics, this is going to show us our league leaders. So this is why we only really show the name. It's automatically going to show what team they're part of. And if you have a photo uploaded, it's going to show that there. And then when I click on the player, it's going to take me to their profile, and it's going to show me historical statistics and any other profile information, including things like a biography. Whatever it is that you want to have displayed in there can be displayed as part of that profile. So that's what we're referring to with those profiles. So I'm going to go out and take a look at some other options when it comes to reporting. So we've looked at all the different permissions and then how we make sure that we can customize the display. And then I'll also point out that, as I mentioned earlier, are different person types. Everything I can do with players, I can do with coaches and officials, and I can do very similar things with registrants and volunteers. So find athletes, this is where I'm going to go in here, but if this was coaches, it's exactly the same thing. The difference is that we're searching athletes here, and the other search is going to give us just coach results. So we can search by all kinds of different criteria. In order for me to see my specific custom criteria that I just selected, I want to use the option here that says additional details, show additional person details. I'm going to not check it for a second, and then we're going to search. I'm not putting in any criteria. I'm just searching my entire database of players. So it's going to list for me all of the players that I have in this system. It's going to show me what my result was. So there's 289 of them. I can email them from here by emailing the players or the parents or both. So this will email the player email and the parent emails that are in the profile. I can also export these details to a CSV formatted file. And if I want to, from here, I can click customize this list. When I click that, it takes me directly to edit player info displayed so that I can customize my search results. Notice here that we're going to be seeing master ID and athlete ID. And then we're going to see first name, last name, email, date of birth. And then I'm also able to see access code in my search results as Goalline admin. But I want to see different results than that. So now if I check the show additional person details, I'm still going to see the same number of results and I'm still going to see the same order. I'm still going to be able to export it. But when I export it, I'm exporting all of those fields, not just the basic information that showed up initially. So as we scroll over here, we can see I've got everything that I checked off as part of edit player info displayed in this list, not just the basic information. So it shows me here that current team, which is going to populate with the team they're currently assigned to. Other reports are going to be available in your people reports section. And the reporting options here, there is an audit log that allows you to view what changes have been done by other administrators. The audit log is generally something that you would use retroactively to try to find the source of a change, and the Goalline support team can assist you with that. The transaction report goes hand in hand with our registration tools. The transaction report is where you would go to report on this specific financial activity and potentially to export the CSV file of your transaction report to import into your accounting program or to provide to your treasurer. This also works with if you're using StackPay. So if you're using Goalline registration with StackPay online payment, this report is also going to help you reconcile with your StackPay report and vice versa. Going back to people and reports, we'll just take another look and see what else we've got in here. So the executive reports, this may not be available on all sites, and it really is just high-level overview information that kind of summarizes basic registration counts and numbers. So it is a decent place to go and take a look if you're interested in knowing the number of athletes across an age and gender distribution. But typically, it really just provides overview information that can be helpful for applying for grants and things like that. Find People is a search tool that does allow you to search across all of the different person types within the platform. However, there is no customization to the search results, and you can't email from the search results. Emailing from search results is from the person-specific searches. We also have the email announcement form that we'll take a look at in just another moment here. If I want to do a find person search to search any participant type, I can check off all the boxes here that say, I just want you to search athletes, coaches, and officials for people named Amanda. I can do that search, and it's just going to check those person types. If I don't check any of these boxes, it will search across all of them. But as soon as I start getting restricted, it's only going to search the person types that I selected. All right. And then text message report. If you're using Goalline's text messaging in combination with your email announcements, the text message report just provides you an overview of how many messages were sent within the date range that you've selected with the type that you have selected here. I realize I did skip over a little bit of executive. I'm going to click on add, edit, delete executives here. If I can remember where it is in here somewhere. I always have a little bit of a hard time finding that. There we go. Add, edit, delete executive members. So this is where I was mentioning it is really good idea to include your executive listing in here. First name, last name, and date of birth is required when you're putting them in, but it's not always on. It's not going to be displayed on the public side of the website. Date of birth does not get displayed on the public side of the website regardless. There's no option for that. Email address and things can be displayed, so you can and phone numbers can be hidden or shown. It's up to you. You can also include a biography that you can update and edit and make it look nice and fancy. And then here's how you create those positions. So if you use a board of directors, you can put in, your chairperson and your committee members and things like that, or, your president, vice president, secretary, registrar, whatever positions you use, you can put them in here. And then as you create those positions, those are available as titles to select. So this is a great option for adding those executive members. There are some other reports throughout the site. I just want to point out a little bit of those. So there's a venue distribution report that is a really great one. The venue time summaries, that's what it's called. Venue time summaries is a great one for associations to make sure that they're using their venues and spreading the times across their teams equitably, depending on what your policies are there. Leagues may be interested in that as well, just to see which leagues maybe used more field time than others, for example. And then on the official side, there are a ton of reports. I'm not going to go into them all specifically, but find officials is going to be one of the most used ones, as well as payroll summaries. But there's also things like game counts per team, game counts per league, evaluation reviews, and things like that. So there's lots of different report options available in Goalline. And then finally, let's get to some communication. As I've already noted, every time you're getting search results for a person type, you're able to email directly from those search results. You're also able to send email announcements. I'll go to this email, their master menu. When I email from the master menu, I want to select send an email or email/text message if you're using our text message tools. You provide your subject line, you provide your body, you indicate if you want to send it as a text message if you're using that feature. And then at the bottom, this is where we select our recipients. The recipients are selected the same way as we were already looking at things, by person type. So do I want this to be sent to athletes? Do I also want it to go to their parents? Do I want it to go to coaches? If I want it to go to coaches, do I want it to go to all the coaches, or just coaches with the head coach position, or just coaches with the manager position, or maybe using the control key, head coach and manager? So the trainer is not going to get this email. Email subscription lists can be emailed. These are going to be not specific to any type of list. It's your general information list. Website administrators are available to select by their title. So you can select that, yes, all of them, or just people who have this specific title. Officials, again, it's going to send to all officials. When you've selected athletes and coaching staff, I was kind of being incorrect, I guess, when I said all, because it is all of these positions, but specific to certain divisions. So who are we sending it to? Is it all of them, or anyone who's not assigned? Or is it both, anyone who's not assigned or assigned? So I often say, if you want this to go to absolutely everyone who you have an email address for, you're going to check off all these boxes, and you're going to check off all assigned as well as unassigned. Because I have both leagues and rep teams, I'm going to make the same selection in my team section as well, because rep teams are treated specifically different than leagues are going to be treated. So I can send this to everyone in my system by checking all these boxes, assigned and not assigned. And then I can also send it to my executive listing. So I don't have a lot of executives in here, but you can select the team staff and executive listings to receive your emails as well. So your website administrators, you could send an email announcement that you're only sending to website administrators. When you send your email announcement, it does get logged in the system, which is a great idea to make sure that you can always look back at not only who sent it, but when and who the list of recipients were. So if I click on this, I can view, here's the announcement, and here are the recipients. I selected coaches and team staff and website administrators, and it's going to list for me who it should have gone to, as well as who it actually went to. So that is our email communication. As you drill down into a league menu, you are also going to find an email option. It is exactly the same, except I can only select from the teams that belong to the league I'm managing. I can't send an association-wide announcement to my participants from the league-specific menu. Same thing goes for teams. I just drill down on a specific team, and I'm only sending my message to that team, but it's using the same function. The same tool is available. I'm going to go back out to the master menu and just one last thing, and that is to click on news articles. So from our website function, I can click on add, edit, delete news article. I can do this from the league and team menu as well. When I create the news article, I can also send it immediately as an email. So I can create a news article that will be published and available on my website for anyone to go and see, but I can also click the box to make sure that I'm sending it as an email as well. And folks will receive it in their email, but they can click to view it on the website. And if I also choose to send it as that text message, I'm able to where is it there? So the text message option. I'm also able to send it as a text message, and they receive the first 150 characters. Then they can view more of it. News can also be posted just to officials instead of being published on the website. And you can also, depending on if you've got access and log into your Facebook page for your association, you can also have this article immediately and automatically post to your Facebook. So that's how you can send email communications. We can email directly from search results in any of the people sections. We can email from the email header in your menu from both the master, or from all three of the master, the league, and the team specific menus. And you can update the information that's displayed by using edit player info displayed, or edit coach info displayed, and so on, to make sure that wherever this person's information is displayed, either on the admin or public side, is showing you the information that you want and need as an administrator. So that is our webinar for today. I did end up taking the full hour. I knew I was going to do that. So thank you so much for your time and your patience. This will be available on our YouTube channel in the future to revisit, but you'll also be receiving a recording. So if you're watching this later, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and I can't wait to reach out with our next invitation.